Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my journey through the implementing specification grading and mastery learning for a course that I teach called photomedicine. And so first thing, I just wanted to show you the difference between what I did in Canvas in fall of 2020 compared to fall of 2021. This was adapted from Stephen Meng's course, and I just found it was a lot more friendlier for students to have fast links here, a welcome message, a Zoom fast link for students, quick links to tokens and so forth, compared to the years before where I didn't. So this is a course that is primarily taught for biomedical engineering students. I'm here at UC Irvine. I'm associate professor, and I teach this undergrad class that's 115 undergrads in this class. And most of the BME students that take this class are actually getting a special concentrated degree in biomedical engineering, undergrad degree. And 30%, the rest are biosci. So this is cross-listed with biosci D130. So it's not one of the core classes that's required, but there's a lot of students in this class. So this is how I formatted the class in terms of specs grading format. The question overall is, did they master the material? And so I came up with these types of assignments, 5 homework assignments. They were not graded. They were analyzed during the discussion sections. I had 5 critical thinking group assignments, which enabled them to work together, and I was trying to engage active learning, and that was a pass-fail the way it was graded. I'm going to show you how I did this. And then I also assigned 10 quizzes, which were also pass and fail, and 5 tokens, 4 retakes for the quizzes. And then they had a final exam that was graded on a point level, not specs grading. So my format was more of a hybrid format. And they did have a token to answer one additional question that gave them a given number of points for their total exam score. So if you look at the hybrid specs grading here, this was adapted from Kate McNally's course grading style, where the students get this grading and assignment, so they know what to aim for. If they want an A in the course, if they want a B in the course, a C in the course, and a D in the course. So if they want an A, they have to at least turn in 4 out of the 5 homeworks, and that's not graded. Again, this TAs go over their homework assignments during this discussion time. The critical thinking problems, they have to pass 4 out of the 4 to 5 assignments, and 3 for B, and so forth. And quizzes, they need to pass 9 of the quizzes to be in the A range. And then finally, the final exam was on a score-based system. And I realized that this kind of there's some issues and challenges with this, and I will talk about it in the next couple of slides. But just to show you the overall kind of grading scale here of what I converted from my previous class. The students were given a self-check guide. Again, this was adapted from Kate McNally's handouts, where they could track for themselves the number of homework assignments that they had completed, track for themselves the number of critical thinking assignments that they passed or not passed. And this was done during class. This was all virtual, I have to say. None of this was in person. So the students who were not able to go into breakout rooms because they were asynchronous had their own individual assignments to do. But I graded them according to the rubrics of what I'm going to show you after this. The quizzes were all done, again, asynchronously. I gave them first I started with a 24-hour format for them to turn in, but then I realized if they do a token and they do a retake, it's hard for me to close it on Canvas and reopen it back up. So I had to extend the final deadline for taking the quiz. So they didn't have a time limit until students can retake the quiz and using a token, and then I can close that assignment. So there were some challenges there. And then finally, the final exam was done on finals week. And again, they had 24-hour turnaround, except for those with exceptions. Those would be students who requested extra time through the disabilities office or center here on campus. Okay, so the critical thinking group interactive format was based on this. So this was meant to engage them in active learning. So what I did is I placed them in breakout rooms. Again, this was all virtual. They had to, either read a manuscript or watch a video in this case. And then they had to work together in a group, come up with a question, answer the question, and then the rubrics was set up in a way that allowed them to think beyond that particular paper or video that they watched. And so in Canvas, you have to put some sort of point system here. So I just, kind of graded them on thoughtfulness of the question. So something that went beyond, what is the wavelength that you need for exciting this particular fluorophore that was already in the paper, if they had to go beyond that. And then the originality of the question, the clarity of the question, and the quality of the answers. And so here the total points were 8. And so I put 8 to 7 was a high pass, a low pass, and then they had a fail if they didn't follow the instructions. And I think, and I'm going to show you some of the survey results from the critical thinking assignments. So the quiz, how the format was done online, it was open notes, open book. So they had a lot of time to figure out what the answers were. And I found that they found it very challenging because I didn't ask direct questions from the lectures. Like they just had to find the answer in the presentation. They actually had to think about how to answer the question. That's why I gave them tokens, because I found that the quiz format was a little bit more difficult. And in the first half of the class, they were doing it within 24 hours, but it was really difficult for me to track the tokens. So I extended the deadline of the quiz. They could take it in about 4 or 5 days. That gave them enough time that they know if they didn't pass, they could use their token to retake it. And then I also changed the format during the course. I allowed students to see which questions they had gotten wrong. Before, they just didn't know. They submitted the exam, they got a final score, but they didn't know which ones they got wrong. So they didn't know which ones to go back and study. So I changed that, and that was based on a token survey that I had sent to them. I changed it to multiple attempts, and then the token, I added tokens to increase the number of attempts. Adding tokens for the quiz helped me track the tokens as well. So the final exam format, this was not specs grading. This was just straight point system. They had 20 multiple choice questions. They had a couple of short answer questions were worth more than the multiple choice questions. And then they could use, and if they had tokens left over, and I gave them a final token survey for the course, they could answer an optional question on the exam, but they still had to answer it correctly. And they would add an extra 5 points to the total grade. So in this case, I did have a Google form that was submitted for tokens, so it was easy for me to track, a little bit easier for me to track which students, could do this. And so going back to the student learning outcome, finalizing the grade was a challenge because, if a student, and I went back and forth with my mentors talking about how do I give a student a grade if they passed, they completed all their homeworks, they submitted them, they passed 4 out of the 5 critical thinking problems. They did fairly well in the quizzes. Maybe they passed 8, but their final exam, they bombed it and they got like a 60%. Then what do I do in that case, right? So it was really hard for me to gauge here. They were no longer in the A range or the B range. Overall, it depends on how I weighted the assignment. So what I decided to do is I decided to give, this was already placed in the syllabus, the total weight. So I kind of went back and did it in an Excel sheet just to give you an idea as to how I transferred these pass, fail, submitted all those as assignment to some sort of numerical score so that I can give them a final grade in the exam. The final was easy because it was already numerical, but how do I gauge this student going in with an A, but then bombed the exam with the final score. So I decided that this is the best way for me to do it. It's just numerical. So I transferred the homework assignments turned into some numerical scoring based on Canvas scoring scale. Critical thinking, I did the same, and the quizzes, I did the same. And of course, the final is already numerical. So then weighting all of these numerical scores, I was able to come up with the final grade for the students. So I did survey the students to find out what they thought. So how do you feel? And this is one of the questions. Do you feel that the class was based more on learning focus rather than on grade focus? And 86 of them said yes, which is about 75% of the class. 22 of them said no, it's 20% of the class. And 7 of them said other. So I found that this was a good thing. At least greater than 50% of the students felt that they didn't have to worry so much about a numerical score. They were more relaxed and more at ease with the course and focused more on learning. So another question that I asked was rate your perceived level of reasonableness regarding the grades for each assignment. So most of them said they were satisfied or very satisfied. That was 87% of the class said that the reasonableness of the grades were good. 11 of them were indifferent, 11% of them were indifferent, and only 2.5%, only 3 students were dissatisfied. So finally, additional comments from the last token that I gave them in the class. They were allowed to, submit their own. This is just copy and paste from their comments. So the positives were that the course is well designed and they like the grading system. And I'm just selecting the ones that were targeted towards specs grading or how the course was overall for the grading that I've switched to. Many of them liked the tokens. They thought it was a very good idea. However, it wasn't very organized, and I have to agree with them. For me, this was the first time doing it, and trying to do this in a virtual format was really difficult, especially on Canvas, which I'm not first on Canvas. The students also, they said they appreciated the tokens. They liked that the TAs had kind of more discussions with them on things I didn't cover in class, and that was because of the homework assignments, even though they were not graded. They enjoyed the pass or no pass threshold in assignments, which this was directly from a student survey, allowed them to focus less on their grades and more on the content. They liked the flexibility of the course and the focus on content rather than grades in the class, and they loved the token system. The negatives were that it was difficult to understand the token system. I need to place what the tokens look like. Also for myself, I was kind of implementing things as I went along. I first wanted just 2 tokens overall, but I noticed that the way that I had reformatted my class, that they needed to take more, they needed to do more tokens because the quizzes are really difficult. And also not in the middle, but in the very beginning, when they started taking the quizzes, I didn't let them see which questions they got wrong, but they finally were able to do that. And I changed that format too. I found that, so most of them found the token system a little bit confusing. It was hard to track for them. It was hard to track for me. So I have to find a better system to do that. Then they thought that the grading table, which says that they needed to complete these homeworks, pass 9 quizzes, for the A is a little confusing. But I think that next time going into this, I think I have a better idea as to how to present this to the class so they're not confused. So overall, how did the format of this class change since the previous time before I implemented this specification grading approach. Before, I only had 2 homework assignments. They were all graded. They had 1 midterm exam and 1 final exam. There was no active learning. There was nothing that engaged them to think critically or anything about the class. But this course, this whole workshop training helped me to change the format so that I could now grade them differently, and it's easier for me to track. I gave them homework assignments that were not graded. They had quizzes, and they were able to retake the quizzes if they had failed them. They also had critical thinking assignments, which was more active learning, and they did still have a final exam. So that's the difference between 2021 of the fall and 2020 of the fall. Students really enjoyed the critical thinking for active learning. Students like the token system. And just key takeaway, I need to make sure that everything is outlined better so that students get this information more cleanly and there's no confusion. Also, I'm not going to be changing things in the middle of class. For me, this was really a learning experience, but I have a much better grasp now on how to present that to students so they're not confused. So I just want to thank my mentors, Kate McNally and Jennifer Fong, for their help and support, and everyone at the Teaching Experiment Academy for sharing all their knowledge and their expertise with me. So thank you all.